With more than 6,000 small and microcap companies listed, if you're looking for the next apple at the earliest stage, then channelchek truly is the orchard. The listed companies support channelchek, so it's free for you, the potential investor, to gain access to institutional quality research from FINRA licensed analysts, advanced market data, industry reports, news, and a growing catalog of videos and webcasts. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and register for channelchek so you're always up to date on what's going on at the small and microcap data place. Welcome to the virtual Roadshow series presented by channelchek. This Roadshow features Richard Spencer, President and Director, and Keith Barron, CEO and Chairman of Aurania Resources, OTC ticker symbol AUIAF, TSXV ticker symbol ARU. Following a formal presentation, they're joined by Mark Reichman, Senior Research Analyst for Noble Capital Markets, a FINRA licensed, SEC registered broker-dealer, for a Q&A session featuring questions that were submitted by the live audience. You can find Noble's research on Aurania Resources on channelchek.com or by clicking the link in the description. With that, I am pleased to present Richard Spencer and Keith Barron.
Great, thanks very much and welcome everyone. Welcome from Quito, Ecuador, and during this presentation, before we get on to the question, and in fact during question time, Keith and I will be making forward-looking statements, so I just warn you about that. We're talking about the southeastern part of Ecuador in the white square down there towards the bottom right of the graphic. Ecuador has become an exploration hotspot. There have been a number of already beautiful discoveries made of both copper and gold, mainly in the main part of the Andes, which is in the slightly paler gray area. And what we're going to focus on in this presentation is this white box where Ecuador's two modern mines being mined to the correct environmental and social standards have come on stream in mid-2019. And this is the area, the red box, where we're exploring. Now, focusing in a little bit more on that project area, the red box is about 500,000 acres of virgin territory. It's never been explored before. And there are two things that attracted our attention to this particular area, applying for that 500,000 acres to the government and having the government grant those concession rights to us to allow us to do the exploration there. The first one is that Keith, our CEO, did a lot of work in the Spanish archives and in South America in identifying or following up some of the lost cities. These were gold mining areas that were mined by the colonial Spanish. And that research, that historic research, defined Logroño and Sevilla as lying within this concession area. Those two old Spanish mines that were mined in the late 1500s lay between two geographic features which are now covered by that red box. So that's the sort of premise on which the exploration started in this area. However, both Keith and I and our exploration group have a lot of experience, and we've fortunately had a lot of success in previously taking up unexplored areas in jungle and making mineral discoveries in those areas. And this geological trend just to the south of us, where all these different colored triangles are, that is a very well endowed gold and copper province. And some of the discoveries in that area, including Fruta del Norte, which is now in production, and Mirador, were discoveries that Keith and I made for companies that we previously worked with. Now, the important thing is that this geological trend trends straight into this red box, which is our concession area. So apart from the historic side of things, looking for Logroño and Sevilla, those Spanish mines, we just thought, well, they've got to be the same kind of gold and copper deposits that we find in the area contiguous with us, extending into the area of the red box. And our exploration commenced there about 4 years ago. Now, our management team is pretty slim in Canada. In Ecuador, we've got 44 employees, all but one are Ecuadorian. And the Ecuadorians, as well as our VPX and the rest of the management team, have they're certainly incentivized. Not only are they paid good salaries, but they have stock options and that kind of thing. So they're absolutely aligned with the shareholders. And boy, these guys work incredibly hard, and our success lies in their hands a lot of the time. Where we stand at the moment, we're drilling with 2 rigs at the moment. We're drilling for the sedimentary copper in Senken N1, and we're now transitioning across into Senken West, Senken B. It's all more or less in the same area, same target type, and we're searching for sedimentary hosted copper. The second rig has moved to Tyria, which we believe is our first discovery in this 500,000 hectare area. It's a silver and zinc rich area, and our first hole is on its way down at the moment, and we plan to drill a handful of holes there initially, and depending on how that drilling works out, we'll either decide to extend that drilling or cut it short. But the way things are looking and what we expect is that we'll be drilling at Tyria for a while. The dark orange are areas that have been drilled before, and I'll talk a little bit about them as well. The next one to be drilled on the right-hand side there in the blue is Kuriyawi, but that is jostling for position with a couple of other targets such as Kuriyawi 2 and 3, and a couple of others that are being worked on in the field at the moment and looking pretty good. We're lining them up for drilling as well. So the drilling is in 2 areas, Tyria, which is the silver zinc area that extends over about 22 kilometers. It's a bit of a daunting task to drill out something as big as that, but boy, we think that this is our first discovery, and we're going to be very interested to see what our drilling comes up with in that area. The other rig is working in the Senken 1 area, drilling for the sedimentary copper at the moment. And I should just mention that Gregor Borg, Professor Borg, who's done a huge amount of work both on the African copper belt and the Kupferschiefer, which are the 2 biggest sediment-hosted copper deposits in the world, is actually with me in Quito at the moment. We're driving down to the field area this afternoon. He'll be here for the rest of the week. And once we've got his input, we'll come out with a press release on what we're thinking in terms of the sedimentary copper and silver. Now, what I just wanted to focus on very briefly is a potential relationship between the sediment-hosted copper and the sediment-hosted lead zinc silver that we have at Tyria. On the left-hand side is a map, and what you need to form a deposit is 3 things. You need a source of metal. You need a plumbing system to get those hot fluids from that metal source to the area where the third thing is the trap site, to get the metal to that trap site. And on the left-hand side on the map, the red lines are the faults that are the plumbing system that bring those hot metal-bearing fluids into the area where we know we've got very good traps. We've got reactive rocks. So as soon as we can get metals and metal-bearing fluids into those rocks, they're going to react with those rocks and drop their metal content and hopefully form, or that is the objective, is to look for a metal deposit in those reactive rocks. So we've got the plumbing system in the red lines. And then Tyria, we know that zinc and silver is dropping out of these solutions there, forming high-grade areas, and that's what we're drilling with the 1 rig at the moment. And also the copper in the southern part of this map in the lower right, in the Senken area, we believe that those fluids also got into that area and dropped the copper out in that area. But the Senken and Tyria Schimpia are part of the same very, very extensive mineralized system. So this mineralized system between the copper and the silver zinc goes for about 45 kilometers. And, you know, people are very often asking, okay, well, why should we invest in Aurania as opposed to any other exploration play that's out there? And there are very, very few juniors that have a contiguous land position, junior exploration companies that have a land position that's big enough to have an entire mineralized system on them. On it. Normally, a junior will hold a postage stamp of a concession area here and a concession area somewhere else. We have the potential of having the continuity of the silver zinc area grading or gradually changing into a silver copper area. And we have the whole system right in the middle of our concession area. So, you know, this gives us the potential to find huge deposits, and that's what we're after. We're not interested in finding something that, you know, looks interesting, it's easy exploration. We're looking for massive deposits, and that involves a lot more exploration and sometimes a bit more complex exploration, and it takes a little bit longer. What we're interested in Tyria Schimpia and Senken is, as I mentioned, this relationship between copper and zinc. Gregor Borg, the consultant who I mentioned earlier, who's in the field with us at the moment, or going to the field this afternoon with us, he came up from his experience in the Kupferschiefer with the sort of egg-shaped diagram on the top right, that shows the gradation within the Kupferschiefer, within the sort of sedimentary layering in the Kupferschiefer, where you go from the copper-rich areas where the hotter fluids were, and as those fluids cooled, so the lead becomes unstable and the lead precipitates. The zinc is still stable and comfortable in that fluid until that fluid cools some more, and then the zinc can't handle it anymore, and the zinc eventually drops out of solution as well. So what we think is that we have got this system. We've got the zinc-silver system up in Tyria Schimpia, and the copper-rich area is Senken. And on the map on the left-hand side, these are all of our rock chip results. You know, so we're not hiding zinc or anything in the southern area. We're seeing a copper-rich area and we're seeing a zinc-rich area with a little bit of lead in between. And this is our objective. We're not, as I mentioned, we're not playing around looking for small deposits. We are trying to find this entire system. And if we are successful in finding this entire system in the middle of our concession area, we will have a game-changing deposit on our hands. Thinking on a big scale, and that's what we're doing, the blue area, the blue concession area in Ecuador is shown in the top of that graphic. The Kupferschiefer and the Central African Copper Belt, that are these two massive sediment-hosted copper deposits in different parts of the world. They extend for hundreds of kilometers. So the copper deposits are strung out over those hundreds of kilometers. We looked across the border into northern Peru, saw the same rocks having the same sort of copper and silver mineralization in them, and we thought, okay, potentially we're standing on the edge of one of these really, really big basins, and so we swung the bat at it. We took a large land position in Peru. We now have concessions granted for, or the concession applications paid for almost 300,000 hectares, so more or less 1.5 times the size of our Ecuadorian concession area, to cover the prime parts of that sedimentary layering where the copper and silver come closest to surface. And then in Curiyaui, this is another area that we've been drilling recently. The target was a porphyry, so a sort of pineapple-shaped granite at depth, and some of them have copper in them. We've got that from the geophysics and a related epithermal, and epithermal typically has gold and silver in it, like the Fruta del Norte deposit. We are still waiting on results of hole 9. This is a vertical slice through between holes 1 and 2 and 8 and 9. And on this graphic, the sort of paler colors going from green to yellow on the right-hand side and a little bit of orange coming in there, that is effectively monitoring the temperature of those fluids that could have brought silver and gold into the system. So the higher temperature is good, and so we want to move towards the yellow and orange area, and that is what we are planning to do at the moment. We're just refining some of the geophysics to help us know where that source area is. So the drilling on Kuriyawi is on standby at the moment. We have one rig waiting in the field there at the moment for us to get back to that area when we've refined the geophysics. So the geophysics and the modeling of the geophysics is iterative. We start off with a very basic mathematical model on the geophysics, depending on what's being measured in the field. And so those geophysical measurements, the field measurements, go into these mathematical models. And then when we drill a hole, the geological information that we get from that hole is fed back into the geophysical model, and that helps us to refine the geophysical model. So we're getting better at this, and we should have a tighter and more precise target in this Kuriyawi area defined from the geophysics pretty shortly, and we're quite excited about what we're seeing there. In terms of share structure, it's relatively tight still. Outstanding about 56 million shares, market cap about 120 million Canadian. Nice tight share structure, and we intend to keep it that way. And you know, I'm in Ecuador at the moment. Keith is in the States and coming back to Ecuador shortly. Sometimes it can be a little bit difficult to get hold of us, but Carolyn Muir is the person who knows where we are at all times, and she can channel your questions through to us. So please make contact with Carolyn. Any press releases that are unclear, just get hold of her and make sure that we're answering your questions correctly. Okay, so I'll hand it over for question time now.
Thank you, Richard. I'm Mark Reichman, the Noble Senior Analyst who covers Aurania Resources. I'll be reading the questions submitted for both Keith's and Richard's response. So we do have a few questions on the drilling program. First is, have you received the assay results for holes 3 and 4 at Senken N1 and hole 9 at Kuriyawi, or when do you expect to receive them?
Mark, we're expecting to get them back very shortly. Yeah, and you know, once we get them back, we'll put them into context of those the alteration minerals that tell us where the hotter part of the system was. And you know, with Gregor Borg here, we're hoping that those results will arrive while he's here, and then certainly on the sedimentary copper, we should be able to put out something next week, and on hole 9 at Yaui shortly after that. So very shortly.
And then has the second drill rig been deployed at the Tyria Shempia target?
Yes, it has. It's down quite nicely on hole 1 at Tyria Shempia. It's about 200 meters at the moment, and it's planned to go to about 300.
And then will the rig that was parked at Kuriyawi be moved as a second drill rig at Senken, as Keith suggested during the annual general meeting, or could it resume drilling at Kuriyawi?
Not sure at this stage. I mean, you know, we literally are you know, deciding things as we get intercepts each day. It's just good to have that drill rig on site. Who knows, we might actually decide based on the new geophysical modeling to drill the next hole at Kuriyawi with that third rig. You know, obviously we've just got to be careful of flow of cash at the moment. If we had an endless supply of cash, we would be drilling with the 3 machines. But just in terms of keeping the expenditure down, we've got to confine ourselves to 2 rigs at the moment. But the minute that we have a discovery, I can promise you, and I'm sure that Keith will be on board with that, you know, we'll get that 3rd rig into the field.
So as a point of clarification, you do have 3 drill rigs in the field, 2 are active.
Correct.
So what differentiates the 4 epithermal gold targets, and is Kirapan new, and what put it in the lineup?
Go ahead, Richard.
Very simple. Keith, do you want to answer that?
No, you go ahead. I'll pick up at the end.
Well, very simply, Kuriyawi has, Kuripan has gold in the streams. It has some indications of veins. We see quite vestiges of hot fluids passing through the rocks, and we're always looking for those hot fluids. Always trying to go from the rocks that were affected by cooler fluids towards the hot fluids. That's where the deposit will be. So, you know, we're just doing some groundwork there at the moment. We've done some soil coverage, got some gold in soils. So we like what we're seeing at Kuriyawi. The other area that is rising pretty quickly in the ranking is La Torre C. You know, the names get a little bit confusing. La Torre C is actually only about 2.5 kilometers north, or a mile and a half north of where we've been drilling at Kuriyawi. And, you know, the geophysics is looking good there, and we've got a lot of sinter lying around there now. So sinter is the Yellowstone National Park kind of platform. And, you know, one can use the textures within that platform to take you towards where the geyser used to be. Obviously, these are geysers that have been inactive for 150 million years and been covered by other rocks and that kind of thing. And we're using that and the geophysics to refine the target there, but it's looking pretty good, and it's moving up the ranking pretty quickly. The more field work we do there.
We have a few questions about access agreements. What % of the project area do the existing access agreements cover, and when do you expect full access to all concessions in Ecuador?
The access agreements give us access to about 75–78% of the area. You know, that's an ongoing piece of work. You know, some of the communities have said that they don't want their area explored. We are always very cautious and very respectful of that. We don't want to be operating in an area where the people don't want us to be. However, what we are trying to do is establish a relationship that is sound right from the beginning, because, you know, the kind of deposits that we're looking for are going to be, if we are successful in finding those deposits, they're going to be active for and mined for a couple of decades. So, you know, it's crucial to start on the right footing. You don't want to be starting where the community doesn't want you there, but the government says, okay, well, you've got the right to explore in that area. Despite our right to explore there, we don't want to force those communities. Having said that, in most cases, we're in a lot of communities at the moment who initially said that they didn't want us there. And, you know, once they've seen the way that we've worked and the respectful way in which we work with the people and the way we treat the environment and the water particularly, you know, they've said, well, come on in and explore our area. Keith, do you want to say anything there?
Yeah. You know, initially when we got into the area, the perception of people, generally speaking, in Ecuador is that mining is artisanal mining. It's very, very destructive to the environment. Nobody ever does any reclamation. They pollute the area with mercury. They never pay any taxes. it's all bad, bad, bad. And certainly that is the legacy of artisanal mining, and certainly not the legacy of companies like Lundin Gold, who are doing it properly for the first time in the country of Ecuador. And we want to emulate that, or whoever comes after us and actually does the actual mining. But in terms of the way that the Shuar people are, the Shuar people don't want to live in a primitive state of grace. The demographics is such amongst the Shuar that there are a tremendous number of young people. Predominantly the population is under the age of 25. They all have cell phones, and they all communicate with the outside world, and they all want to be educated. They want to travel. They want material goods and everything else that everybody else has. And how are they going to eventually get that? Well, we have been lucky enough with our exploration, fortunate enough to find some things that we think are going to potentially turn into major, major deposits here. And the local people stand to gain immensely from this. It would not only provide jobs, infrastructure, and all of that stuff, but it is written into the constitution of the country that they would get about 3% of the royalty on the mineral deposits, and that would be life-changing for these people. And there's really no looking back. So, when we first entered these areas, because this perception was that mining was artisanal, none of the people wanted to talk to us. None of them wanted to sign agreements with us. Now we have 43 agreements written with villages. And it just keeps rolling and rolling and getting better and better. We provided well over 1,000 jobs to individuals within the Shuar community. Not permanent jobs, but kind of on a rolling basis. And it's a fantastic situation for our stakeholders.
There's one more question related to that is, do the access agreements have a finite life, or do they have to be renewed?
Mark, we keep them pretty short. They're generally annual agreements, and that it gives us quite a lot of flexibility. It gives the communities a lot of flexibility because we're saying to the communities, look, effectively help us to discover something because the knowledge of the local people is just absolutely phenomenal. So we're going to the local people for help drawing on their inherent knowledge of the environment in which they've lived, been brought up. So we keep them short so that we can, and the people can, so that the agreements can evolve as we have success or otherwise in the area. That just keeps things nice and healthy. And I just to carry on with what Keith was saying, we live in or we work in an area and live in an area where the pristine nature is absolutely magnificent, and people are terribly worried about pollution and that kind of thing. However, now that we are working in those communities, and in the exploration industry, we have the privilege that I don't think that any other industry has of actually living with the people in the same conditions in our two-man tents for 2-3 weeks at a time, eating the same food, sleeping in the same place, and that kind of thing, to be able to get a more sort of wholesome understanding of what the problems are and what the opportunities are. And they see the way we treat the environment, and part of that and obviously the water. And so part of that living with the Shuar people in our fly camps and the exploration has resulted in the communities asking for us to help them and bringing the government to help them build latrines. There are no latrines throughout this area. All the sewage, the raw sewage from the people and animals and everything else just goes into the rivers. So you've got all this pristine looking water, but it's absolutely contaminated. There is no garbage disposal system. the municipalities just don't have jurisdiction in this area. So we're going in and helping the people at their request, which is absolutely fundamental, to just build, basic garbage disposal things. So, the people themselves are starting to realize, hey, let's control our pollution that is sort of ongoing at the moment, sort of, rather than dealing with it as the sort of academic abstract concept that everyone talks about. So our interaction with the communities is yes, there's a formal part that comes through the access agreements, but there's probably a bigger component of it and a more fundamental component of that interaction that comes through just living with people and interacting with people. So it's a fantastic.
So it's really kind of a social license and social contract. So would finding solid evidence of the location of the lost cities cause you to send a drill there? And what other info would cause a drill campaign there?
Oh wow, that's a loaded question. Who sent that one in? Well, we actually got some really interesting intel from one of our people yesterday. I'm not going to comment on what it is specifically, but all I can say is that we are getting closer. We are starting to narrow things down. And remember, we have not had 100% access to all of our areas. We think there's a pretty good reason why a few of the individual settlements have not wanted us particularly around, and people can kind of read their own opinions into that. But I think that we are very, very close now.
Then how far has N1 hole 4 come in terms of meterage?
Mark, it's about 350 meters or so. So it's getting right down to the end of the hole. And we've got hole 5, the platform ready to go and all that kind of thing. So, the logic that we're using in Senken N1 is we're stepping up on the search for the sedimentary copper up towards the northwest, towards Tyria Shimpia.
A question about joint ventures. During the annual general meeting, Keith mentioned the potential for joint ventures and even the possibility of spinouts. Would you please discuss the difference and how they might apply to your project? And I guess implicit in that is with your large land package, you really have the potential for several company makers.
Yeah, let me handle this one, Richard. Richard and I had the privilege to meet with a shareholder, a very, very savvy shareholder in Ecuador yesterday. And he asked us specifically, why is our project special? What really makes it stand out? When we talk about 22 kilometers of zinc and silver and 23 kilometers of copper and silver, kind of rolls off the tongue neatly. But what the hell does it mean, and how do you wrap your head around it? Because it is too big for a lot of investors really to comprehend. Because there's not other parallels out there. There actually are, but they're not in the public company domain. They're actually held by big majors, and you don't see press releases, you don't hear about it. So, going back to first principles, when I acquired this piece of property, which is 500,000 acres, I put the money down privately out of my own hip pocket, and I paid the fees. Now, if you had to go through the usual route of a junior company and raise the money and then declare use of proceeds, you couldn't do that. It's not legal. So I went ahead and I put the money down for this thing. But if I had tried to do it in a public company situation, my board of directors would have said, there's no database here. There's no discoveries that have been made previously. It's like a blank page. And you're a nutcase. Don't go ahead and do this. You are not using public money to do it. But look what has happened. We have found these incredibly long trends of mineralization, and that is only a consequence of this huge, huge land package that we've been able to get together. Now, you can see similar sorts of things that have been done by the Chinese, but it's owned by the communist government. We never hear about it. There's a massive, massive zinc silver deposit called Junding that you probably never heard of. It's 200 million tons of 5% zinc. And that is on a trend that's about 150 kilometers long. But the Chinese own the whole thing. In this case, we own the whole thing of this massive trend of copper and zinc. And it's just fantastic. So I think in terms of majors and joint ventures and all the rest of it, what is going to happen here, because this is so unprecedented, being held by a junior company, when we start to get drill holes of significance in this thing, then the principle of FOMO will take over. FOMO is fear of missing out. And the majors will look at this thing and they'll say, we don't want company X to have it or company Y to have it. We want us to have it. So there's going to be a bit of a bum fight for this. This is my expectation. And I think this is coming. With this big trend of mineralization, we do not say at any point that we're going to be mining 23 kilometers of ground, you know, like tearing up the jungle for 23 kilometers or whatever. That's not the way it works. But on that trend, you have a high probability, high percentage that there are going to be spots along that trend that are going to be economic with multiple potential multiple mines. If it was a small piece of ground, let's say it's a kilometer long, then what are the chances of you having an economic deposit in that? But when you've got something that's 20 kilometers long, and this is exceptional. It really is. It is way out there in terms of world-class stuff, in terms of a mineralizing system. Then you open up incredible possibilities. We know that all the majors are looking at us right now. So I'm very confident that at the end of the day, we're going to have a lot of success here and a lot of companies really champing at the bit to do something with this. What would you say, Richard?
Yeah, absolutely, Keith. And Mark, just going back to the original question, I mean, you know, we've got a number of majors in the data room at the moment, and you know, you mentioned at the beginning there's potential to do a couple of different joint ventures, and I think that that's absolutely spot on. I mean, you know, some of the majors are much more interested in the copper porphyry potential, others in the sedimentary hosted copper, others in the lead zinc and you know, some of the high tech elements that are associated with that. So I think that, you know, as we make progress with the exploration, it's going to be a little bit more obvious for which majors want which areas. You know, up till now, while we've been sort of feeling our way into the exploration, it's been very difficult for a major, I think, to get its head around you know, which area to go for. Some of them are interested particularly in the epithermal gold potential. And just to go back to the sort of deal structure, I think the sort of joint ventures that appeal to us are, and a number of these have been done in Ecuador already, where the major will come in and take over all of the exploration expenditure up to completion of a feasibility study. So that means that Aurania doesn't have to keep raising money to explore those same areas. But so we're protecting the shareholders' dilution at the corporate level, but people have got to understand that there is dilution on the project level. But you know, that's a really nice, neat relationship, because it means that the joint venture partner and Aurania are focused on getting to the definition of a deposit, and is that deposit feasible to mine as quickly and as efficiently as possible. So that's the sort of joint venture route that I think that we would like to end up with. And typically those agreements have been done where the major that's coming in earns 70 or 75% of that specific project area on expenditure to get to on completion of the feasibility study. And then in terms of the spin out, a spin out might be where we take a specific logical area that we can sort of ring fence and say, okay, there's a specific kind of target in that area. Does it make sense is it easier for us to raise money on that specific target in a vehicle of its own, And you know, that's another possibility as part of the sort of splitting up of the concession area, just to make sure that the money, whether it's ours or money from the joint venture partners, is being focused on those targets specifically.
Another question, how is the infrastructure in the area at the moment, and what are your predictions and costs for investments in infrastructure to make transport to and from an actual mine?
Oh, wow.
There is
not a hell of a lot. There's not a hell of a lot right now. Yeah. So it's going to take, you know, for anything, mining development, it's going to take major installations of a road network, of hydroelectric, a lot of stuff like that. But remember, it's the same scenario as Fruta del Norte was. When I walked in there for the very, very first time in 2002, there was bubble there. You had to get there by walking on a corduroy trail, and you know, it was about I think about 11 kilometers walk in the mud, and now there's a paved road going to it. There's a hydroelectric line going to it, and all the rest of it. And all of this stuff is possible once you have the goods.
Another question is, how long is Mr. Gregor Borg's visit planned for?
He's going to be on site for about a week or so, just long enough to have a look at the core from the holes that we're drilling, and potentially get out in this field. And you know, the exciting thing, and one of the critical reasons for bringing Gregor in now specifically, is that we're drilling a hole 1 at Sanken, and you know, we go back to that relationship, possible relationship between Sanken and Tyria Shimpia. Sorry, I don't know whether I got the names mixed up. We're drilling the first hole at Tyria Shimpia, and we're about to move on to hole 5 on Sanken. But you know, as we've said, we believe that those two systems are part of a massive mineralized system. Gregor was the guy who came up with that model of the copper grading through to the silver. So you know, going to be it's going to be critical for him to see hole 1 at Tyria Shimpia and tie that into what he's seeing in the copper as well. So yeah, around about a week.
But he's coming back next month.
Yes,
we might have to kidnap him or handcuff him.
Yeah.
Another question asking to remind us about the company's ownership structure. How much is owned by management?
Well, I own about 42.5%. I think the rest of management owns about 1% or 2%, something like that. But you know, personally, I don't draw salary from this thing, and I consider myself to be completely aligned with the shareholders. If the shareholders don't make money, I'm not going to make any money. That's the premise right there. And as I said earlier, I put up the risk capital for this thing out of my own hip pocket. You know, I'm not doing this for charity. I intend to make a whole pile of money here.
Then the last question is asking about your financing needs. Will you need to raise more equity in 2021? And would you issue stock at the current price, or could you stop gap by financing with a promissory note?
I think, you know, yes, the first question, we will have to raise later in 2021, and you know, we're open to any option that makes sense, that's least dilutive. I think, you know, the crucial thing at the moment is that we believe that we are very close to a discovery. If we haven't got one at Tyria Shimpia, we will have one in one of the other targets pretty quickly, because you know, we're getting closer and closer to this thing, or to a couple of different targets on the project. And you know, this is the question: do we hold on and you know, wait for the discovery, or you know, finance it at a presumably much higher price, or do we play it a bit more safely and finance at a slightly lower price and just give us at not quite as high a price? It depends on the results at the moment, and but I think for anyone sitting on the sidelines, I wouldn't be like to be sitting on the sidelines waiting for an announcement from this company. I think that we are so close that I certainly wouldn't like to be on the sidelines.
The last question is, go ahead.
And I want to raise, when we do raise money, I want to do it at a much higher price than we've got. And as Richard just said, I think we're right on the cusp here. I mean, we're putting the first damn hole in Tyria, and it's a fantastic target. And I'm very, very optimistic about this.
Well, and the last question is, while it seems that you have already made new discoveries, how do you define a major discovery? So I guess the investor's asking, what will that look like?
Mark, I think the first thing, we're dealing with big target areas, so I think it's a sort of two-step process. The one is to intersect really good mineralization, mineralization where you can put the grade into an ore calculator, there's some of these various ones that are out there, and come up with a number that is north of, say, $140, $150 US per ton of rock. And that can come from copper, it can come from gold, silver, it can come from a mix of things. So I think that that's our sort of economic objective. I think when one's generating results that give you that kind of value, and bear in mind that we as a public company can never say that. We are not allowed to give guidance as to the value of rock per ton. All we can do is give the values to you, and you run them through one of the online calculators that are out there. So it's critical that people understand that. And then and then in terms of sorry. And then, I think discovery is on that basis. And then your second word, major discovery, that comes with a little bit later, with us being able to drill, a reasonable number of holes in that, and of boreholes in that. But that's where there's a fine line as well. We don't want to get drawn into resource drilling and that kind of thing, because you look at the share price performance of most discovery companies, and the massive change in valuation comes with discovery. And then, as people drill out the resource, so the value sort of fades away a little bit, because people get bored. They go on to other things. And we're absolutely cognizant of the shape of that value chart. And our whole setup is to deliver the discovery over to a major who has, and I cannot stress this enough, and Keith alluded to it earlier, any major that we would like to do a joint venture with, and these are the guys who are in the data room, have impeccable environmental standards and social standards. That is a commitment that we've effectively made to the Schwar, that we will not sell them down the drain in terms of bringing in some scungy company that doesn't have the same environmental and social standards that we have. So, but coming back to the discovery, I think it's a two-step process. The discovery, and then, being able to say it's a major discovery.
Well, Keith and Richard, thank you so much for joining us today and helping us gain a better understanding of the company's story.
Thank you for joining us for this virtual roadshow presentation brought to you by channelchek. View our YouTube channel for more video content, including C-suite interviews, virtual roadshows, and conference presentation replays. New content is added regularly, so subscribe below to stay up to date. Visit channelchek.com or click the link in the description to access equity research, news, and advanced market data on this and 6,000 other small and microcap companies.